All right, I'm anxious to talk to you now and take our discussion about FAANG and BAT a step further. You've known that throughout this course we've applied Porter's 5 forces framework to look at companies. We want to do that with Google and Facebook, which are the subjects of this week's readings. So you probably remember all of Porter's 5 forces, and in putting those into play in Facebook, their challenge now is to really keep satisfying customers to reduce the impact of competition and substitution. I think also Facebook has a challenge in figuring out how regulation might play into what they do, given changes in privacy in Europe. And some of you may read about or learned about GDPR, and some of those implications will be important for Facebook. Competitive rivalry for Facebook is moderate. There's a small number of firms in online advertising services, especially in their niche, but there's significant variety in these firms. So search advertising is much different than Facebook advertising, and of course being able to tailor ads to different segments or personalize those ads can be done much differently in Facebook than it can in Google. So there's a lot of variety there, but that attracts the advertisers to different platforms depending upon what it is that they're selling. Now, competitive rivalry is also moderate because there's low switching costs. So advertisers really can change platforms easily. Now that tends to oftentimes increase rivalry, but in this case, since there's so much variety, it doesn't have much impact. For Facebook, the bargaining power of customers and buyers is strong. There's high substitute availability and relatively low switching costs for those customers, but the high demand helps to reduce the customer bargaining power. Not many people leave Facebook once they have invested a lot of time into posting things on it and engaging with friends and others. So there is some lock-in there, but there are other competitors that it's easy to switch to. So the bargaining power of suppliers for Facebook is fairly weak. The suppliers are moderate in size. There's a large population of them. Now, I mean, you wonder who they are. Well, that's server sellers, computer networking and technology sellers, and office supplies. I mean, I guess the labor force, the high-tech labor force, there may be some bargaining power that they have as hiring gets tighter and tighter. But overall, the power of the suppliers is weak for Facebook. The threat of substitutes is probably pretty strong. Advertisers can go to television and radio and do print advertising, and of course with all the variety now in the way television and content is produced and served up, that's tended to keep the prices lower than it has been before for different types of advertising venues. There are also low switching costs and a high availability of substitutes, and those substitutes are pretty much available at that moderate cost level, like I was saying. Now, the threat of new entrants coming after Facebook head-on is pretty weak. There's a high cost of brand development, and Facebook has already paid that price. It was an early entrant. It's maintained its mantra among its dedicated users, and it's built a great deal of customer loyalty. So it'd probably be hard for a competitor to come right in to Facebook's, play against Facebook in its own game plan. So now let's look at Google. Basically, they have 86.2% of the global online market in 2018. Just to give you a comparison, Bing's at 6.55%, and Yahoo's at 3.27%, and Baidu is at 1.08%. So that just gives you a feel of how powerful Google is in that global online market for search. The global competitive rivalry, though, is strong. Though I would say Google has many different businesses now, so even companies like Comcast are a competitor. But for this search engine at that level, like especially in the US market, it's hold on Android, and that it just remains so strong that it's going to be very, very difficult to push it out, even though that rivalry is strong. The bargaining power of suppliers is low because Google has huge brand and marketing power. There's a high availability of supply, and the types of suppliers are pretty diverse. Their global suppliers include Gumi, Colopl is another company, Clab, and Metula Group. It's interesting, I took a look at Metula Group. It basically is one of the suppliers that helps with AdSense, and they're a Spanish company. So it just gives you a feel as to how global Google is and how much innovation is coming from around the world to help keep Google in its position, its market position. The bargaining power of buyers is weak. Google's been dominating this market for so long, and it has huge advantage because it pre-installs that search engine on all the Android phones, and that gives it a significant global market share. The threat of substitutes is low to moderate. Yahoo and Microsoft don't really have the necessary user base to exert too much pressure. And Google searches are, let's face it, they're really fast and they're accurate. And with the Android having Google pre-installed, there's a big first mover advantage that's difficult to thwart because people just don't go in and immediately start switching to other search engines. The threat of new entrants is low here. Google's really created some formidable barriers to entry. Given their dominance, so many media outlets have been required to direct their business models and subscriptions to its platforms. So basically, the ecosystem surrounding Google has altered because of all of that marketing power. Even Microsoft and Yahoo, given all their tries at coming after Google and their considerable resources, they just haven't made too many inroads yet. So the question is, given these two companies and Porter's forces, where do we see the possibilities for FANG and BAT market disruption? Well, I think it's pretty clear from our discussions that artificial intelligence is probably going to be one of the dominant disruptive forces that we'll need to keep an eye on. So here's another technology. Remember, we've talked about the hype cycle and where different technologies stand in that hype cycle. I would say artificial intelligence is now moving into mainstream, and we see that as evidenced by some of the things I'd like to tell you about. So there's a lot of vocal support and major backing for artificial intelligence from the Chinese government right now in terms of the BAT companies. Not so much governmental support in the same way as in China in the US-based companies. Global companies are supposed to come up with AI strategies that are going to help them compete with BAT, of course, but they are going to have to do it with a little less governmental support. So let's look at Baidu. In 2011, they started discussing artificial intelligence and how they were going to leverage it in their investor calls. And their research and development expenditures matched their rhetoric. They actually spend $2 billion annually, and that was in 2017, on R&D and AI, and they set up the Baidu Institute for Deep Learning. The other company that I want to mention is Tencent here. They've actually participated in more deals for global expansion by making bets on AI than any of the other Chinese companies. And their mantra, what they say inside their company, is that put AI in all we do. Alibaba's not going to be left behind. They've invested in an Israeli vehicle-to-vehicle network company called Nexar. They're working on a smart city project, and they're launching R&D centers in 7 cities around the world. I think it's DAMO is the name of it in Israel. So they're very much getting a way that they can track global innovation and put that into the artificial intelligence that goes into their products. So AI is probably going to be the big thing for us to watch in terms of technology disruption. And we can see now that the battle of the voice assistants is already on. Baidu is launching a smart speaker. It's called Raven H, and it's applying for a lot of voice patents in Japan. One of those patents, for example, is a voice print login method. That'll be interesting. Alibaba has a smart speaker. It's called Tmall Genie, and over 1 million of those have been sold since their launch in July 2017. Not to be left out, Tencent's speaker is called Ting Ting. It will make access to WeChat applications and services hand-free. So they're continuing to leverage their WeChat popularity and connect Ting Ting to that service. Tencent has over 50 US patents on voice processing and other authentication methods. And Tencent leads the others in facial recognition patents, which is very interesting. Baidu has a bunch of patents revolving around driverless cars. So these patents are pretty much a good sign of where these companies will be investing in the future. So now let's take a look at health, auto, and smart cities as other areas. Baidu is trying to create what we might think of as the Android of the auto industry. They call it Apollo, so it's like a type of operating system they want to have the success that Google did, of course, with Andrew. Alibaba has City Brain, and that's designed to connect with urban management systems. That's like emergency dispatch, your ambulance calls, traffic light control, and things like that. Tencent is pushing into healthcare artificial intelligence, and that's really consistent with China's push to be a world leader in genomics and personalized medicine. They're partnering with some United Kingdom companies, Babylon Health for virtual healthcare assistance, and Medopad, which brings AI to remote patient care. Tencent is always also focusing its R&D on its AI-based cancer diagnosis and electronic medical care platform, and the name of that is Miying. Now, I'm mentioning all of these names, and I know it's going by fast, but as you take a look at these companies and watch the players, I think it'll be fun to watch how each one goes their different way. So in conclusion, talking about these competitors and the future of AI, China is really the world's largest consumer market with 1.4 billion people. BAT has home turf advantage over Google, Apple, and the other FANG players. FANG is bringing its AI tech from other countries into China through partnerships, trying to make inroads there. We'll see what happens with how the markets might open in China given the current political situations. BAT's biggest challenge right now is the lack of foreign language user data. And that's data to train its algorithms. So let me say that again. In the artificial intelligence world, data is really powerful, and it's needed to be able to train those intelligent algorithms. So data becomes a very important asset for these companies. So that's why the BAT's companies are a little bit challenged in terms of not yet having the foreign language user databases to be able to leverage. But their smart speaker expansion into these global markets will help them deal with this, and they may introduce those smart speakers at low price to be able to gather this data. Well, across auto, health, and retail, BAT's going to be a tough global competitor leveraging artificial intelligence. In all the research I've done so far, though, most analysts are putting Google in the lead right now of all of these companies on artificial intelligence, but a couple of discoveries is all it takes to move another company ahead. Thank you.